Blind Citizens Australia proudly presents the An Eye to the Future Job Ready Workshop Series. Interviewing with Confidence. Hosted by Blind Citizens Australia. Blind Citizens Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past, present and future.
Okay, so my name is Claire. I am a project officer with Eye to the Future. With us today, we have my colleague Maddie, who is also a project officer with Eye to the Future. And we have our guest speaker, Lorraine, who we will hear from shortly in a pre-recording. An Eye to the Future is an initiative from Blind Citizens Australia, funded through the Department of Social Services, that recognises the career potential of people who are blind or vision impaired. We support job seekers with job readiness, including resume and cover letter preparation, the job search, interview preparation, and we can offer one-to-one discussions about the topic we are covering today. We also support employers to think differently about their recruitment and support employers to employ someone who is blind or vision impaired. We also support employers in creating an accessible recruitment process through education and awareness for teams, assistive technology where applicable, and check-ins with both employer and employee as they settle into the workplace. So in our last workshop, we discussed the topic of approaching job applications with confidence. Today, we are going to discuss interview techniques and how to approach the interview process with confidence. And following on from our previous workshop, we are going to lead with our skills and what we can offer to the role rather than our vision. The interview stage does offer an opportunity to disclose your vision to an employer in a positive and conversational manner. If you do choose to disclose at this time, you can use a disclosure script to help you prepare and frame your vision using positive language. One consideration to be mindful of with disclosure during the interview stage is that an employer may not feel prepared to ask appropriate questions. And so again, your disclosure script can help you to take the lead and prepare some responses to any questions or comments that you feel may be inappropriate. And we're going to discuss this further in our next session. So before we dive into interview techniques, we introduce our guest speaker, Lorraine. Lorraine is a HR practitioner and recruiter with over 30 years of experience in this field. Unfortunately, Lorraine couldn't be live with us today, so we are going to hear from a recorded talk from Lorraine about how to approach the interview with confidence, along with how to use the STAR interview technique. Okay, so I am just going to now share my screen. So, here we go.
About start preparing your answers and questions like you're going to get shortlisted. I always try and put myself in a position where I'm imagining or walking through the doors to meet people I don't know to sell myself pretty much. And sometimes that can be a bit burdensome because you think, oh, just give me the job, I know I'm good. But we need to tell everyone how good we are. So know your strengths. That's a big thing. That's the first thing you need to be 100% confident in, that you have the ability to attend an interview and sell yourself that you're someone that they would like to invest in and what you can bring to the table, because the employer is looking, what are they going to get for their money? Okay, they are employers. That's how they think. Not just that either, but it is one thing that they will be looking at. What's this going to cost? Okay, so you might have a wealth of knowledge, skills and experience that someone else may not have. That's what your main focus is, not what you can't do. That comes in the interview later on down the line. So we're jumping to the selection process. So hypothetically, you've been given an opportunity to attend an interview, and getting that attendance from a recruiter is because you've been a standout to them. They've looked at your CV, they've read it, they can see what strengths you have, what your weaknesses are, because it's okay to put your weaknesses in, just not what you can't do. So we're moving on to the selection process, and I'm mindful that we're moving very quickly here. So ensure that you have reviewed the advertisement and the PD, which is the position description for the role, and have a good understanding of what the role will entail. And this is where you can have a checklist too. Think about your strengths, skills, and experience you can bring to the role and the opportunities it will and can present to you. Know your resume and your application. That's super important. The interviewers will be assessing your response against your written application to ensure your skills and abilities do match your resume. So a good recruiter has a sharp, idea on what they're expecting. So always put yourself up on that building block and be a little bit taller in your approach. So visit any websites or get familiar with their social websites if you can, and what the organisation does. Like I was saying before, that's really important. They love the fact that someone has taken the time to do some research and where you might fit into that. And that's a big seller as well. You can prepare a list of questions you may have about the role. Ensure you have suitable interview attire. So this is all preparation stuff, because the turnaround in a recruitment process can be 24 hours. I'm giving you a scenario. Some can take weeks, some can be very quick. So always be prepared. So ensure you have mapped out a route to the appropriate site to arrive at least 5 to 10 minutes earlier before an interview. Okay. So usually when you're attending an interview, there will be a selection panel. It primarily consists of the hiring manager and maybe another employee. Okay, and these people are the expert in the matters of that role. It could be a program manager, like Bettina might have an opening in her area, and she will know what she wants to support her. And predominantly, the HR people or the program manager or whoever's interviewing you will point out right from the start what the interview's about, what they're looking for, and the fact that you've got this far, they're impressed with your CV, cover letter, and how you present yourself. So your first impression is going to be the most important to them, along with your CV. Okay, there will be lots of questions. If you are asked, always listen very carefully. That's my weakness, everyone. Sometimes I jump in too quick and take over the conversation. So be mindful to listen carefully to the questions asked, and then make sure you do answer the question in full. So if you need to ask your interviewer to repeat the question or further clarify the question, always do so, and they don't mind. They would rather you stop the interview and clarify what it is your interpretation is of their questions. And that shows maturity, and that shows the fact that you're sincere, you're authentic, and your integrity is high, because you don't want to waste their time. You don't want them wasting your time either. So it's a two-way street. If you've been asked a two-part question, make sure you answer both parts. Now, this can be tricky because sometimes the interviewers may not have the skills and the experience at a level where they can ask a question and pause and wait for the answer. They're bang, bang, bang straight into it because there could be other people waiting. Most interviewers will ask behavioural questions, which will enable you to describe your experience, knowledge, and capabilities. in most relevant areas to the job. So make sure you have relevant examples ready. And by using the STAR method, which is your situation, your task, your action, and result method. So you use a scenario, you can use a summary of an event that may happen where you were confronted with something, what actions you took, the situation, the task, the action, and what the end results would be. And that's usually, you can talk about anything that happens in life, what your experience is, walking into a shop and how you manage someone that may have been rude to you and how you may have de-escalated. So that shows your compassion and your ability to negotiate. So things like that, always tap into your own personal strengths and emotional empathy, because sometimes we forget, some people don't always know how to use theirs, and unless you make them aware. So avoid using yes or no answers and elaborate as much as possible when responding to a question. And don't assume the selection panel will know your skills and abilities just because they have read your application. So it's really important, again, this is about selling you and your skills and experience. So the more researched and well prepared you are going into that interview, the more chances you're going to have of moving on to the next phase of recruitment. My suggestion would be look at bigger organisations that can support people who may be blind or visually impaired. I'm not sure if we use that word. Look at the bigger organisations, like where you know that they will have a social inclusion policy, and I don't like to use that, but sometimes we have to tap into that to get where we need to be. And remember, there's a lot of employers out there who still need educating and being aware of what's out there and opportunities for all people.
Just going to stop sharing my screen there.
Perfect. So my name is Maddie, and I'll be presenting on the next session. And thank you for Lorraine for contributing that to our workshop about interviewing from a recruiter's perspective, from someone who has years of experience in being on the interviewer side. So in the next section, I'd like to talk about disclosure at the interview stage, some of the pros and cons and considerations to that, but also preparing for an interview, preparing for an in-person interview and preparing for potentially an online interview. So if we talk about preparing for a face-to-face in-person interview, firstly, congratulations, you've made it through to the interview stage of the recruitment process. And we now need to think about, well, what will we wear and how will we get to this physical space? And hopefully we've given some consideration to that in our application. So firstly, what will we wear? Smart casual or business is often a good starting point. And a question that I've been asked before, and sometimes I would wonder, is, well, what is smart casual? What is this ambiguous thing? It's a step or two up from what you would wear to get lunch with a friend. So let's think, instead of runners or trainers, try clean, smart leather shoes. Instead of denim jeans, maybe we'd try some solid colored trousers. Instead of a short sleeve t-shirt or singlet, maybe we'd try a clean pressed shirt or blouse. Lean more into the professional or the smart than the casual if you're in doubt of what you should wear. And if it would help you, have someone check your outfit before you leave for the interview. It's always good to get a second opinion or someone to say, you know, that shirt's probably not the best one, and appreciate some of that input. And then secondly, for a face-to-face interview, where is the interview? Hopefully in the application stage, as you chose to apply for this role, You've given consideration to the location of the role and whether you would be comfortable to travel there on a regular basis. And being invited for an interview might be the first time you've traveled to this location. So let's think about how you will get there on time, or even better, how you'll get there early, and any practice or support you might need in getting there. How will you get there? Will it be by public transport, support person, taxi, Uber? Will you walk? Plan this ahead of time and practice. When you arrive to the address, what floor is it on? Are there instructions to the entrance of the building? And again, there can be merit in traveling there ahead of time to have confidence on the day. The last thing we want to do on the day is be a little bit flustered or stressed because we didn't get there in the way that was how we hoped to get there, and we might be a bit late and not in the right headspace that we've spent so much time preparing for, which is what we'll go through later with Claire. And of course, today there's lots of online activity, lots of online interviews that will happen, and sometimes the interview or role itself might not be at a physical office location. It might be hybrid. It might be a work from home role. So that's another consideration around preparing for an interview that might be online by Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Consideration again to what will you wear? Just because the interview's at home doesn't mean we get to wear our home clothes for the interview per se. So again, smart casual is often a good starting point, and the same rules would apply as to what I mentioned above. If it would help, you can have someone check your outfit before you leave before you sign on for this interview. Again, being ready for the meeting ahead of time. Although we don't need to travel to the location, check your camera setup before going into the meeting. Jump online with a friend the day before to make sure the background is clear of clutter or any unprofessional backgrounds, and you're in camera view. Knowing your keyboard commands prior, will it be on Teams or Zoom, and is there any refreshing or practice that might be useful before the meeting, before the interview? And then there's disclosure. And as discussed in the first workshop of our series, disclosure is a topic that's at the forefront of our minds. And an interview is just one opportunity to disclose if it's the right time for you. And it's a personal choice whether you do or don't, but some considerations that you might want to think about before going into the interview is your vision impairment or blindness visible or invisible? If you enter an interview with a dog guide or a cane, the interviewer is going to assume that you have a vision impairment. And this is an opportunity now for you to control their assumptions and demonstrate what you can do. Referring back to our first workshop on disclosing with confidence and how to facilitate this conversation. In this instance, you have the opportunity to control the disclosure conversation, as opposed to not discussing what the interviewer can see and will probably make assumptions about. If your vision impairment is invisible, or they wouldn't be able to see a visual cue that there's a vision impairment, you don't have to disclose at this point, but you may choose to, depending on the support and modifications you require for the interview itself or for the workplace. This is your choice, weighing up the adjustments you need for the interview or the role, and perhaps how comfortable you feel in doing this as the interview progresses. It is an opportunity for you to say what you can do, how you're going to do it, with the technology that you use or with the modifications that you need. So they're just some considerations about disclosing in the interview, and also some practicalities of if there's a face-to-face or online interview, what do we need to consider? So now I'm going to hand back over to Claire, who's going to talk you through the STAR technique, which Lorraine has just mentioned in her talk as well.
Thanks very much, Maddie. Yes, and just to say thanks to Lorraine for letting us share her insightful talk on the interview process. And thanks, Maddie, for talking us through preparation for the interview, and disclosure considerations. As you said, those are always at the forefront of our mind. So we're going to elaborate on Lorraine's key points as we move into our next session for this workshop on how to use the STAR technique for an interview. Okay, so before we get into a step-by-step approach to using the STAR technique, let's start by recapping what the STAR technique is all about. So it stands for situation, task, action, and result. The STAR technique is a way to answer behavioural interview questions, as Lorraine mentioned. And these are questions that ask you to demonstrate how you have used your skills and knowledge to reach a desired outcome or to problem solve an issue in the workplace. So although, of course, we cannot prepare for the exact questions that an interview panel might ask, it is helpful to prepare some examples of your success stories that cover common themes that you would often see in an interview. So these include things like an accomplishment that you're proud of, a time that you went above and beyond, a conflict that was resolved successfully, a challenge that you overcame, and a mistake that you have learned from. So for these topics, you'll want to showcase your transferable skills, professionalism, and willingness to learn. So for each topic, it's helpful to think of an example and describe it using the STAR technique. So you'll describe the situation, so what was going on in, say, 2 to 3 sentences. Describe the task, what was your goal, in 1 to 2 sentences. The action, what did you do, in 2 to 3 sentences. And the result, so what was the outcome, in 2 to 3 sentences. So how do we prepare a STAR response to the most common interview topics? And that's what we're going to be going through today. So let's start with step 1. So step 1, you'll need to reflect on your related experience to the job that you're applying for. So this will help you to identify the most relevant examples for you in your interview responses. So you'll want to begin by just listing everything that comes to mind in the following areas. So work or internship experiences in the field, volunteering or community work in the field, shadowing or observational experience, related training courses, research or other projects, and attendance to conferences or events on the topic. In step 2, it's about thinking of a couple of examples in each of the related, in the areas of the related experience you identified in step 1. So when we are thinking of examples for an interview, we want to put our best foot forward as a professional. And so we want to think of examples that are professional rather than personal, that prioritize work experience over education experience where possible, that showcase success stories. So avoid stories that end in an undesired result, for example. And you'll want to keep examples practical and constructive. So it's not helpful to talk about examples that perhaps you feel quite upset about. So for instance, a story that makes you feel angry or blames a colleague or organization for something that they did or didn't do. So we want to avoid those type of stories and really focus on those constructive, practical, and positive success stories. Okay, so let's think about positive and constructive examples that demonstrate you are the best candidate for the role. A good way to go about this is to list a couple of examples for the 5 common topics in interviews that we mentioned earlier. So 1, an accomplishment you're proud of. So can you name a challenge that you overcame in the workplace when volunteering or during a training course? Have you ever had an achievement recognized? For instance, praise from a manager or a colleague, or even an award? So number 2, that common theme of a time you went above and beyond. Have you ever put in extra time to complete a work task or project? Can you think of a time when you really wanted to give a work task or project your all? 3, a conflict that was resolved. Can you think of a time when you found a resolution to a conflict or disagreement with a colleague? Have you ever been in a work situation or working on a group task that was frustrating and you used your communication skills to move forward in the task and get the results? 4, a challenge that you overcame. So, can you think of a time when a work task was not going as planned and you used your adaptability and problem-solving skills to get a good result? And 5, a mistake you learned from. So, looking back at challenging work tasks or conflicts with colleagues, what did you learn and what would you do differently in a similar situation if that was to present in the future? So now you've got those examples in mind, we move to step 3. And you're going to be thinking about a couple of examples for each of the common topics in an interview. And it's really time at this point to select the best example for each topic that demonstrates you are highly qualified for the role you're applying for. So you'll want to choose an example for each topic that is the most relevant to the role you're applying for. It can be good to choose examples that are quantifiable or tangible. So, for instance, you increase sales by X amount, or you developed a more efficient process for a particular system. These are really tangible results that you can talk to. You'll want to choose examples that showcase positive outcomes. So you've got the desired result in the end. And you'll want success stories that you feel comfortable and enjoy sharing. And then we move to step 4, which is writing your STAR example. So you've chosen the most relevant example and you're going to write it out in that STAR technique. So situation, task, action, and result. And we're going to demonstrate some STAR examples through a mock interview now. So in this mock interview, I will be posing as the interview panel and Maddie will be the candidate applying for the role. But before that, I'm just going to hand over to Maddie as candidate now.
Thank you, Claire. So let's imagine I have found a role with an organisation called National Education Provider on Ethical Jobs. And I chose this role because the location is accessible to where I live. With my O&M skills, I feel I can travel there independently or learn to do so. There was a statement of diversity and inclusion on their job ad and website that gave me a contact person to request any adjustments for the application process. And this gave me some confidence in their inclusivity. The organisation has a statement of flexible working arrangements, including flexible start and finish times and hybrid working. I have an interest in the area and I have skills that are relevant. I align to the organisation's values of the values written in the job ad and from visiting the website. And in the position description that Claire, the key selection criteria that Claire will read in just a moment, they did have some statements around you have the experience in a certain area or you have the ability to learn to do so. So they had a focus on learning and acquiring the skills as well as having that experience in the past, which I quite liked reading that content. Over to you, Claire, as the employer.
Thanks so much, Maddie. So yes, in my mock employer role, I am the National Education Provider and we have advertised an entry-level grade 2 role with training and mentoring opportunities available. And our advert reads as, we are seeking a motivated and energetic administration officer to provide high quality customer service through the delivery of friendly, helpful, accurate, and informative advice and services. This position is responsible for completing a diverse range of administrative processing tasks and associated day-to-day problem resolution. And the key selection criteria for this role is a sound understanding of administrative processes relevant to administration, or the ability to rapidly gain such knowledge. Demonstrated ability to establish priorities and meet deadlines. High level of attention to detail and accuracy in written work. Ability to work collaboratively and effectively within the team and to work independently and autonomously. And empathy with and ability to communicate, including with those from diverse cultural backgrounds. Knowledge of computer systems and packages, for instance, the Microsoft Suite. Okay, so we're going to move into our mock interview now. So I'll be kicking it off as the employer, and we're imagining that Maddie has arrived and we're all seated in the interview room, and I get the interview started. So thank you, Maddie, for applying for the role and accepting an interview. So if you're okay, we're going to get started with the interview process now.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you for inviting me for this interview. I'm ready to start.
Great. Okay, Maddie, can you tell us about yourself and what interested you in this role?
Yes, absolutely. I've had several years of experience in administration roles, and what really attracted me to this role was the opportunity to help students and people by providing them with the information that they want in a way that they understand it. Whilst completing my tertiary studies, I observed and learnt from the different administration support styles, and then I moved into working for state education provider in 2021. I believe that education is important, so my role as administration officer is to make sure that they get the information that they need to pursue their academic pathway.
Okay, so let's just step outside the mock interview for a moment. So in Maddie's response, she has clearly set out her interest in the role in relation to her previous experience, and she's also aligned herself to the organization's values. So for instance, as an education provider, we value the importance of education to empower people and set them up on their career pathways. Okay, so let's get back into the mock interview. Thanks, Maddie. So can you explain to us, you've mentioned that you have previous experience in administration. Can you let us know what administration systems you are familiar with?
Absolutely. So ensuring the accuracy of the knowledge base that's used for the organization, for example, the resources, websites, and keeping them updated and current and accessible, and having a good understanding of the whole organization and how to direct people to the right area, key contacts, who does what, and how to effectively direct students or people to those areas. And talking about administration systems is a very broad statement, but I have experience in payroll systems, HR, CRMs, and different plugins. I understand how they work, so I'm comfortable with using various systems, and I'm open to learning new systems as well. With experience in similar systems, I can learn new systems easily. In my previous role at state education provider, I was responsible for the day-to-day administration, including meeting scheduling, booking meeting rooms on-site and off-site, responding to email and phone inquiries, and follow-up as necessary. And in that role, I've used computer programs including Xero, MYOB, the entire Microsoft Office suite, and I'm confident in my ability to learn any additional software or administrative tasks that may be required for the role.
Okay, so let's step outside the mock interview for a moment again here. So Maddie has addressed the key selection criteria by talking about her skills with computer programs and her willingness to learn new systems. Okay, so let's get back into the mock interview. Thanks so much, Maddie. So part of this role is to keep records of our various team meetings. Can you let us know what your approach is to taking minutes in a meeting?
So I understand that meeting minutes are used as a point of reference by the team to measure progress, record facts, and inform absent members of action points. So I make sure that the minutes include all relevant details and are accurate. In my previous role, I was asked to take notes for a multi-agency meeting with external stakeholders. I clarified the purpose of the meeting, made note of attendees and apologies, detailed crucial discussions, decisions, assigned tasks, and action points. I made sure the minutes were written in easily understandable paragraphs and sought approval from the manager before sending out the minutes to the stakeholders. And to do this, I use assistive technology, a screen reader, and make audio recordings and take notes from that. I jot down points during the meeting and ensure accuracy using this method. One thing I overlooked at the time was collecting and attaching copies of supporting documents, and for this multi-agency meeting that I would have found particularly useful. So as a learning from this, I now always make sure that I collect and distribute copies of reports and presentations along with my minutes.
Okay, so again, let's step outside the mock interview for just a moment. So Maddie has used the STAR technique to answer this question. She's explained the situation, so attending a multidisciplinary meeting with external stakeholders. She's identified the task, which was to take detailed and accurate minutes. She's let me know her actions, so things like clarifying the purpose of the meeting, detailing action points, sending out accessible notes with attached documents, and she's let me know what the result or the outcome was. So of that being clear and accurate and detailed minutes that she sent out to all stakeholders. Okay, so let's go back to the mock interview again now. Maddie, I noticed that you mentioned using assistive technology. Can you tell me a little bit more about this?
Absolutely. So I believe I have the requisite skills and experience for the role, and I am a person with low vision, and I use a form of assistive technology that's provided by Job Access to complete my work tasks. I'm really keen to learn any new systems that I may not be familiar with that are involved with the admin duties I'm responsible for. And with the support of a vision specialist, I can work out the best way to access these systems using my technology. As this role is advertised on a part-time ongoing contract, the cost of this process and technology is reimbursed by the Employment Assistance Fund, so there's no additional cost to the organisation.
Thanks for sharing that, Maddie. Perhaps we can continue this conversation at the end of the interview or at a later stage. Would you be open to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So I'm just going to continue on with our final interview questions. So we are a small team and we are often juggling different work tasks. Can you let me know how you manage a large workload while under pressure?
So I make sure I'm organised with timeframes, and if there are some pressures, I prioritise using lists and take the lead from my manager. As a customer service admin, if my tasks are due at a certain time, I take responsibility for that and I aim to organise by task so there's no additional pressure. I guess I do try to work in a way that does minimize the pressure overall and keep myself as organized as possible so that there's less time pressures or pressure for the whole team. In my previous role, I was responsible for the rollout of a new CRM. A large database was stored on an Excel spreadsheet, which was to be transferred to a new CRM. This task needed to be completed within 1 week, so a large mail out could be completed by the business team. Unfortunately, the spreadsheet wasn't flowing through to the database, and it became evident that it was going to take longer than originally planned. My initial approach was to plan and assess the task, as I like to have a plan and time flow for all tasks. Once I realized the Excel wasn't going to transfer, I spoke with the IT support and communicated with the team at every step and provided alternative solutions. The large mail out was delivered on time. However, it was done manually in this instance. I then took the time and opportunity to update the CRM system, and the next mail out a few weeks later was seamless.
Okay, again, let's step outside of the mock interview for a moment. So here, Maddie has used the STAR technique to answer this question. So the situation she described was rolling out a new CRM system. The task was to do a large mail out to students by the end of the week. And her actions including planning out the tasks and troubleshooting issues with other departments, for instance, the IT department. And she let me know what the result was. So she let me know that the large mail out was completed. And as part of that, she was able to update the CRM system. Okay, so Maddie, back into the interview. We do sometimes have calls from students that are feeling stressed due to deadlines. How would you deal with difficult conversations?
So my first step is always active listening, showing empathy and acknowledging their views. I look to identify with the caller what they need and link them to the right place for support. Often clients who are feeling angry or upset will repeat the same thing. So I reply with something along the lines of, yes, I hear what you need, and we need to get in contact with this person who will be able to help you with this. In my previous role at State Education Provider, I picked up a call from a student who was known to the administration team as a difficult caller. I listened to their query, asked some clarifying questions to understand what they were looking for and how I could refer them to the correct supports. At the beginning of the call, I could hear some frustration in their voice, and with a slow and calm voice, asking clarifying questions and having empathy to their situation, I successfully referred them to the correct supports. This student was able to then link into the support that they needed and to feel confident in their academic studies. They did later take the time to thank me for my time and referral.
Okay, so stepping outside the mock interview again, just for a moment. So as well as using the STAR technique, where Maddie has described a situation with a student that has or can often end up having difficult conversations with, and the task of referring her on to the right place with her actions of using active listening and dealing with that individual with empathy. And the result being that the student was signposted to the place that they needed to go to, and that they felt confident and reassured with the support they were getting. So as well as doing that, Maddie has also addressed the key selection criteria in her response. So she talks about having an empathy and effective communication with others. And we know this to be one of the key selection criteria in the job description from earlier. So we're heading back into the mock interview now. Okay, thank you, Maddie. That brings us to the end of our formal interview questions. So I'd like to open the floor and ask, is there anything else you would like us to know in relation to your application?
So again, I'm really good at active listening. I like to help people break down issues and find solutions. I have a calm and empathetic disposition that's helpful when dealing with different people in different situations. And that can also be helpful if there is potentially a communication or language barrier, that keeping very calm when someone's feeling stressed can be helpful. I have great interpersonal skills. As I mentioned earlier in our discussions, I do use assistive technology. And with this, I'm able to complete my role and contribute to the team. I'm confident that my skills on the computer will be more than sufficient for the role, combined with my curiosity to learn and creative solutions to complex problems. I believe I'll be a complement to the team culture and overall functioning of the team, and I'm very happy to discuss this further or answer any initial questions that you have about this.
Okay, thanks. So that brings us to the end of our mock interview. And Maddie's responses throughout the interview have always started with her skills and experience and how these meet the role requirements and why she feels she is the best candidate for the role. Maddie has also taken the opportunity to reiterate how she can complete the role most effectively using assistive technology. And she's really ended by opening up that conversation with the employer, sorry. Okay, so that does bring us to the end of our content for today's workshop. And as a reminder, we are accepting expressions of interest to our program for a one-to-one job seeker support. If you do.
And as always, we will be available by email, bca@bca.org.au, or you can phone 1800 033 660. Thank you again and have a great day.
That concludes today's webinar. You can find out more at itothefuture.com.au. An Eye to the Future is an initiative of Blind Citizens Australia, informing, connecting, and empowering Australians who are blind or vision impaired.